Yorion the Sky Nomad is gone from the modern format, and us mill players need an answer as to what we need to do. The metagame is still just as hostile, if not as bad as it was pre-Yorion ban. So what are the cards that we need to put in our deck list? What are some of the things that we need to put into our sideboards to improve our ability to win in this hostile environment? I want to go over 5 cards that I think you should be incorporating in some way, shape, or form into your deck list to improve your odds. And it could be playing all 5, it could be playing 1 or 2, it doesn't matter. But especially kind of the last 2 that I'm going to talk about in this list, those are the ones that I think are going to give you the highest value returns and can be a little bit spicy with some recent wins from some mill players in the mill leagues. Now, let's start things off nice and simple at number 5. We're going to start things off with Ensnaring Bridge, a classic card. Now, I know many of you are already playing this. Now, I'm asking you to simply tweak your numbers. If you're playing 4, maybe go down to 3. If you're playing 1, maybe go up to 2 or 3, right? So you essentially don't need this all the time. You just want to make sure you're maximizing your ability to draw it. You need it when you do, and sometimes you're going to need multiple copies so that if one goes, the other one is still there. Because ultimately, when it comes to matchups like Murktide region, especially in the game 1 scenario, if you're taking a look at this list, this one right here, they have 1 Brazen Borrower and 1 Otawara. If those are gone, they cannot deal with an active Ensnaring Bridge. They're going to have to bolt you out, and hopefully you fetched appropriately. Maybe you have a Crypt Incursion. You've gained some amount of life to deal with that. So a card like this can give you a lot of free wins. Now, especially if you're kind of 4 surgicals in the main board and you're keeping to the surgical plan in the Murktide matchup or other similar matchups, this is the card you want, because this is the type of card disadvantage that you want to take advantage of when you're playing with Ensnaring Bridge. Remembering ultimately that yes, surgical extraction is card disadvantage. You are not affecting the board, and you are not affecting necessarily active or relevant fields in the game. So affecting someone's hand or graveyard may not necessarily be that relevant at that point. So it is card disadvantage, and that's exactly what Ensnaring Bridge needs. You want to be card negative, and that's what you want to take advantage of. When you're playing something like this, you're tapping out on 3, and then you can just start throwing out your visions for 1. Really take advantage of this, hide behind it until you can enact a plan and get to the W. Now at number 4, I want to talk about Echoing Truth, a card that's come in and out of boards, and I really want to promote this in the main board if you happen to have a slot for it. A card that can really do anything, especially with Yorion gone. There's going to be a lot of permanents that we want to deal with. Now, more recently, Rakdos Scam has been a deck that's been coming up in the metagame, and so Blood Moons are going to be a big problem. I mean, not only out of Murktide region, Blood Moon is going to be a very good card right now, especially if kind of 4-color Omnat just turns into like the 4-color Elementals deck, the 60 card version that we saw pre kind of figuring out of things. Blood Moon is going to be good, so having that main board answer to Blood Moon is going to be fantastic. And heck, at the end of the day, you can use Echoing Truth to bounce your own Hedron Crab to then fatal push an opponent's endurance. There's a lot of uses for this card. It's a catch-all, and there's a reason why it's a mill classic. Always remember, if you're unsure, you have options like this that you can take advantage of, and then once you want to tweak here and there, it can come in and out. But please play Echoing Truth, try it out. It's going to give you a lot of wins. Now at number 3, I want to talk about a card, a removal card that I think a lot of players have forgotten about, and that's going to be Eliminate. So with Yorion gone, I'm predicting that we're going to see a lot more 4-color Elementals, the 60 card version with Kahira, and especially recent with the Rakdos Scam, we're going to be seeing a lot more 2 to 3 CMC Planeswalkers. Firstly, we're going to see something like Rakdos Scam play Liliana the Veils. We're even going to see things like Seasoned Pyromancer or Dothy Voidwalkers. There's going to be a lot of things that we're going to have to destroy at the 2 to 3 CMC range that are not only creatures. So our fatal pushes have to be kind of for the creatures, but we need something for the Planeswalkers, right? So again, something like Liliana the Veil that we have to answer, a card that Mill has a very hard time beating, but especially a deck list like this that isn't necessarily playing 4, surgical extraction may not be the answer for this. You're gonna want something like Eliminate if you're not playing Esper or Prismatic Ending to answer a card like this. And then even out of the 4-color Elementals decks that I'm talking about that I think is gonna make a big come in, we're gonna be seeing cards like Teferi Time Raveler. Obviously, modern staple of a card. We need an answer to this just to be able to extirpate and surgical at instant speed, kill things with Drying Lock on the turn we want to, all that good stuff. And heck, at the end of the day, use it as a very efficient removal spell against key cards like Risen Reef that you really just cannot let your opponent on tap with, right? If they're playing Risen Reef on 3 and you let them on tap to Omnath on 4, you're asking for a death sentence at that point. So really make sure you have something like this and have access to a wide variety of removal spells that can attack multiple permanents. If you're playing Dimir, you don't have access to the other colors that give you this, like Assassin's Trophy, Prismatic Ending, cards like that. Really make your cards work for you. A one of won't change your life in a significantly negative way, but you will come across games where you're going to need it. Now, at number 2, as I was mentioning at the beginning of the video, very high value card, especially in your sideboard and maybe even in your main board. I'm talking about Ashiok Dream Render, almost a pet card of mine at this point. I cannot be playing decks of Mill without this card, and I think more of the modern metagame should be playing this. Obviously, I think the rest of the modern metagame has better options like cards like Endurance, but doesn't mean that Ashiok is not good. People are going to be thinking about, oh, 3 CMC, it's slow, it's a planeswalker, it's a type that multiple people can deal with, it's not instant speed like something like Soul Guide Lantern that you could activate at any time. Hold on. Ashiok Dream Render stops Primeval Titan from searching, pretty much just shuts down this whole deck. Ashiok Dream Render, to any Titan player that knows their salt about this deck, will know that Ashiok Dream Render is the bane of this deck's existence. So shutting that down. Next up, the Rakdos Scam decks. You're going to be stopping Kroxa with continuous value. You have a value engine on the battlefield that exiles their graveyard and then provides continuous value past their Thoughtseizes, past their Inquisition of Kozilek. So all of their hand disruption, you're going to be able to circumvent that. You've got an Ensnaring Bridge on the battlefield. That's going to be another permanent they're going to have a hard time dealing with in black and red. So hiding behind your Ensnaring Bridge with your Ashiok on the battlefield, 3 to 4 activations, depending on if they pinged it or not, you will get there with that continuous exile. And then finally, Endurance, the name of the game, will shut down that deck as well. This is my favorite card to bring in against the elemental decks. I don't like bringing in Surgical or Extirpate, and that's my personal philosophy. I find that the elementals decks, or most decks that do play Endurance, and I say most, are what I would call quantity decks, not quality decks, where certain kind of specific cards are really good for that deck, and if you get rid of them with Surgical or Extirpate, the deck will crumble. They are quantity decks. If you get rid of Endurance, you still have to deal with Omnath, you still have to deal with an attacking Fury, you still have to deal with an attacking Solitude sometimes. So getting rid of Endurance is the key, but then you have the repeated activations, and then you have the ability to almost have a soft Blood Moon where, you know, any future fetches they play to try and trigger their Omnaths that are on the battlefield, they're not going to be able to search their library. They're not going to be able to tutor with any cards like Traverse the Ulvenwald or any other two that they have to get the pieces they need. You will be able to shut them down with Ashiok Dream Render, a must play 3 to 4 of, in my opinion, in your sideboards. Obviously you can mix and match a little bit with Soul Guide Lantern to your preference, but I really think playing less than 3, maybe even 2, is a real mistake for your modern Mill deck. Now finally, I want to talk about number 1, the best card that I think Mill players can be playing right now. And this is a spicy one. This is a spicy one, especially, you know, big shout out to Party Time Austin and big shout out to Plato for doing really well with Spell Pierce recently. I think it makes a lot of sense. As I mentioned, it's Spell Pierce, a card that Murktide players have been taking advantage of. And now you're going to say, Shaft, we're not playing Ragavan or DRC. We can't tempo into a Murktide region. What are we doing with Spell Pierce? Well, taking a look at this list, we see that they are tempoing out threats, right? So they want to play the cheapest interactive counterspell that they can, right? The most efficient thing that they can do to stop their opponent's answers, their interactive pieces, and then get their threats out. And we want to do something similar, right? So if a metagame is going to be full of cards like Counterspell or Blood Moon or Expressive Iteration, we want to make sure that we have a lower CMC card that can answer that. We want our opponent to spend more mana, and then we can answer it for less, so that our higher CMC cards are more likely to resolve while they're kind of playing catch up with their unresolved cards. Now, if you look at this modern metagame, Indomitable Creativity, you can counter the creativity with numerous other non kind of permanent cards out there. Murktide Regent, their Lightning Bolts, Counterspells, Blood Moons, 4-color Omnath, you can hit their Prismatic Endings, their Leyline Bindings, anything. Hammer Time, you block the Hammer Time, you block any of their tutors. Rakdos mid-range, there's a plethora of kind of hand disruption spells you can get rid of. Crashing Footfalls, literally the whole combo itself you can counter. Burn literally 90% of the deck. The list goes on. Every single deck in this metagame has something that you can counter with Spell Pierce, and then if it's bad in the matchup, you just side it out, right? There's always a way to get rid of it. If it's not good in game 1, it doesn't matter. You don't play it in game 2, you don't play it in game 3, you don't play it to get the W if you don't need it. Now here's a deck list. Shout out to, again, Party Time Austin for providing me with this. This is a deck list that they are playing 3 Spell Pierces in the main board. I think this is a very good, efficient use of someone's sideboard slots. We are not seeing any Chalice of the Voids in the metagame right now, so you can get away with playing a lot of 1 CMC spells in your deck, and using that, you play a crab on turn 2. Now you don't have to worry about, you know, playing a tap land, playing a ruin crab on turn 2 with a blue mana up. You don't have counterspell. Now you do. If your opponent plays that prismatic ending, you're going to be able to spell pierce it out. They are not up. You get to untap with a ruin crab, pigeon crab, and go off. There's a lot more that you can do on turn 2, on turn 3, on turn 4, and that's what I like. Making good use of your mana is going to be what you want to do, and especially having multiple counter spells up, right? So if you have that kind of turn 2 interaction, then on turn 3 you untap with 3 colored sources, you have Drown in the Lock and Spell Pierce up. There is a lot of things that you can get away with 3 Spell Pierce, and there's a large part of the metagame that uses non-creature spells. I mean, look at us, we are literally a non-creature spell deck, so even in the mirror the card slaps in the main board. So ultimately, yes or no to Spell Pierce? Yes to Spell Pierce. I just implore you to try it. 2 to 3 copies. You don't even need to go to a full 3, but not 1. I highly implore you to try 2. That way there is a high probability of you drawing it, trying it in multiple matches, and let me tell you, you're going to be countering a lot in the modern metagame, and you're going to just see how useful a tempo card like this is, especially with cards like Leyline Binding really seeing play in the 5-color decks. Imagine a Leyline Binding that's not fully 1 mana, right? They don't have all the colors they need. They've played it for 3, they played it for whatever amount of mana that's not 1. You're really going to be tempoing them out. Again, if your opponent is playing non-creature spells for more than 1 mana, we want a 1 mana interaction spell that can stop it. That way we are mana positive, we are tempo positive, we are resource positive, and that is what we want to do when we're playing against a metagame that really holds nothing back and wants to eat us alive. Now, let me know what you think about my list. Let me know if I'm missing any cards, and let me know what you think about, you know, like the top cards themselves. Do you think Ashiok is that useful? Do you think Spell Pierce is the answer that we need? I mean, I personally think so. I would love to hear comments down below, and let me know what you think about some of the numbers. Are you playing 3 Ensnaring Bridges? Are you playing 1? And then how many Spell Pierces do you think is right? Should we go up to the 4? I don't know. I gotta test myself. I gotta talk to some of these players playing the Spell Pierce. I gotta run some leagues. But I really think from some of the kind of random games that I played with the Spell Pierces and seeing some of the success the other players have, I think Spell Pierce is the answer. So we can only kind of take that into the games that we have, and I don't know, hopefully a banned and restricted comes soon and actually answers the real problems of the modern metagame. We'll see. Thanks everyone. Leave a comment down below if you like the video, leave a like and subscribe, do all the good YouTube stuff. I'll catch you again for the next video, and have a good week. Stay safe. Later.